Okay, Robby, what's on your radar?
Representative Peter Meijer is a Republican congressman from Michigan. His district was previously represented by Justin Amash, who's the first Libertarian member of Congress. Meijer is a Republican rather than a Libertarian, but many aspects of his record are friendly, in my view, to the principles of limited government. He has often channeled Amash's independent streak, most notably by voting to impeach President Donald Trump for inciting the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Here he is discussing that decision.
I did not want in my first 10 days in office to impeach a president of my own party. But the fact of the matter is January 6th and the assault on the Capitol would have never happened if it wasn't for President Trump propagating two lies. One, that November 3rd was a landslide victory for Donald Trump that was stolen. And two, that January 6th was the day to stop the steal. And those two lies, which could have easily just faded away into nothing, were continually amplified, legitimized, and propagated by Donald Trump, and it resulted in the deaths of 5 Americans, the defiling of the seat of our democracy.
Meijer's defiance of the Trump wing has earned him a primary challenger named John Gibbs, who's an ardent Trump loyalist who has backed the former president's stolen election claims, while also spreading conspiracy theories about John Podesta and Democrats in general. Now, some Republican primary voters cannot forgive any perceived betrayal of Trump, no matter how well-deserved it is, and thus it's a close race. The primary election is Tuesday, August 2nd. That's today. Now, if Gibbs defeats Meijer, the challenger will have benefited from the financial support of a very curious source, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, an arm of the party that works to elect Democrats. The DCCC spent $435,000 on an ad campaign aimed at boosting Gibbs in the final days before the primary. That's no trivial sum of money. As Meijer pointed out in a recent article for Bari Weiss, it was far more money than Gibbs had raised on his own, and 100 times as much money as Trump himself had donated to Gibbs. The DCCC is trying harder to elect Meijer's election-denying far-right challenger than Trump is. The ad itself is quite insidious. It's aimed at conservative Republicans and takes the approach of lamenting that Gibbs is too conservative and handpicked by Trump. The DCCC is clearly highlighting Gibbs' proximity to Trump in hopes that enough of them will be tricked into spurning Meijer. Democrats' reason for doing this is obvious. They think Gibbs will be easier to defeat in a general election. Here's the ad.
John Gibbs is too conservative for West Michigan. Handpicked by Trump to run for Congress, Gibbs called Trump the greatest president and worked in Trump's administration with Ben Carson. Gibbs has promised to push that same conservative agenda in Congress. A hard line against immigrants at the border and so-called patriotic education in our schools. The Gibbs-Trump agenda is too conservative for West Michigan. DCCC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Now, we have to be realistic. Politics is a dirty game, and both parties routinely engage in this sort of brinkmanship, doing whatever it takes to win more seats. But Democrats boosting Gibbs are squandering considerable moral high ground they might have otherwise possessed on the issue of so-called existential threats to democracy. Democrats have claimed that Trump's hold on the Republican Party is a special threat to the entire U.S. political system, given that Trump has denied the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Trump also pressured his allies in government to prevent the transfer of power to President Joe Biden. The January 6th committee hearings are intended to conclusively show that Trump and his ilk are morally unfit for office and that this reality transcends mere partisan disagreement over public policy. Trump is different. Well, how on earth can Democrats continue to make that argument with a straight face if they're willing to risk helping to elect a MAGA Republican over a more conventional Republican who did defy Trump in order to gain a slight political advantage? It should be noted that Josh Shapiro, the Democratic candidate for governor of Pennsylvania, did the exact same thing. He ran ads aimed at ensuring that Doug Mastriano, who's an election-denying state senator who participated in the protests surrounding the U.S. Capitol, he was there on January 6th. Shapiro helped him win the Republican primary and become Shapiro's opponent. After this came to pass, Shapiro unsurprisingly performed a heel turn, denouncing Mastriano as, quote, a dangerous extremist who spreads conspiracy theories and wants to restrict the right to vote. Quote, if Democrats like Shapiro are going to position themselves as defenders of democracy standing against Republican attempts to undermine elections, they really ought not to help those same Republicans get elected, wrote Eric Boehm, who's a colleague of mine at Reason Magazine. Now, in his article for Weiss's Substack, Peter Meijer points to several other examples of this exact same phenomenon. I'm quoting from him now. It's not just my race in Michigan. While claiming the moral high ground, Democrats have been busy rewarding candidates like my opponent across the country. Colorado, Democrats spent $4 million on TV and digital ads to elevate January 6 attendee Ron Hanks over moderate businessman Joe Odia in the GOP Senate primary. Pennsylvania, as I just noted, Josh Shapiro boosted the January 6 attending GOP candidate Doug Mastriano in television ads, spending in one ad double what Mastriano had spent on his own campaign. In Maryland, the Democratic Governors Association spent hundreds of thousands of dollars boosting Dan Cox, who not only attended the rally on January 6th, but called Mike Pence a traitor as the violence unfolded. In Illinois, the Democratic Governors Association dropped $35 million on super PAC ads targeting moderate Republican mayor of Aurora, Richard Irvin, and elevating his election-denying Trump-endorsed opponent, Darren Bailey, who ultimately won the nomination. This strategy has backfired spectacularly on Democrats in the past. It was an open secret that the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign was actively rooting for Trump to win the Republican presidential primary campaign. Clinton staffers reasoned that Trump would be easier for her to beat than the other candidates. We all know how that turned out. Expecting political figures to be more forthright is obviously a hopeless endeavor. There's something particularly craven about a political party cynically donating nearly $500,000 to a Stop the Steal extremist in hopes that he takes out a more reasonable, formidable obstacle to securing that party's control over the House. All while the party's members are collectively weeping at democracy's supposed grave. Those are crocodile tears. And I should note, it's not all Democrats doing this. There have been several Democrats I saw in Michigan who condemned this ad and the role the DCCC was playing in it, which is nice to see.
Yeah, but you know what's funny? I was listening to Pod Save America yesterday, research, and they brought this up. And the guest was Adisu Demisi. He's a former campaign manager for Cori Bush, Gavin Newsom, and some others. And they asked him what he thought about this strategy. And he kind of ducked. He was like, look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I haven't run this playbook before. He acknowledged that this is something that is broadly done and something that he supported in the past, sometimes successfully. But there did seem to be some acknowledgement that there was this public backlash from mainstream Democrats who are frustrated that their campaign dollars, all of those donate to Act Blue because abortion rights are on the chopping block, are being used for stunts like this. And I think that you're completely right when you say the rhetoric about the threat to democracy Trump and Trumpism poses is horribly undermined by even playing footsie with the idea of advocating for a Pied Piper candidate like this to get elected. Yeah,
I think that's the clear difference, right? Because of how Democrats are framing the stakes of elections now, Trump unique corrupting influence must be gotten rid of. It's not just like, it's not some normal circumstance where they're backing the far right candidate for some narrow political victory. They're making the claim that anyone supporting these people, like they're trying to distinguish Trump-type Republicans from any other Republican.
Yep.
But then they're backing the Trump one.
And how do you go to bat for people like Liz Cheney to be like the next Democratic President of the United States of America if your grasp on how courageous someone is to go against Trump is so thin that you would support the opponent of someone who is going up, who had the decency
and the clear takeaway from this strategy is that if Liz Cheney, I mean, this is never going to happen in a million years, but if Liz Cheney was somehow making some bid to become the new face of the Republican Party, was successful in those efforts, they would work to sabotage them. They would work to sabotage them because they want Trump. They want Trump front and center so they can run the campaigns against him.
Yeah, well, you set in your radar, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I think that's very well put. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.